What is the most amount of money that you've seen someone make from Kobalt off of their publishing? Like, just
So,
throw some numbers at me.
so
Let's get into some
obviously
numbers.
we have confidentiality with all of our clients, like
Okay.
anyone who signs up. So I can't
Don't mention names.
I can't throw out names. You know, what I would say is that publishing is a really important part of the puzzle. And especially if you're a producer or if you're a songwriter and you're not really mainly an artist, but you're mainly helping others with their music, then it could be your most important part of the royalty puzzle.
Right.
And, you know, at Kobalt, we have really established songwriters and producers who are pulling, you know, easily over a 2 or 3 year period. You know, we're not talking 7 figures, we're talking higher than 7 figures, right? So,
Wow.
you know, this is an important form of income, not just at the very top, but also for the middle class of songwriters who are just getting started, who are just starting to really reach their audience. It's easy to forget about it, as I said, because you don't get paid publishing by default. You know, a lot of people are out here thinking that they're making a pretty good money, you know, living in music. Yeah, like my DistroKid checks are coming in and like I'm doing pretty well. I'm playing live shows and I'm selling merch and like I'm actually making it, never realizing that they're not even touching their publishing income. They're not collecting it. And it doesn't stay in the system forever, which we can get to. But so what I would say is that it is a significant form of income. There are definitely people at the top of their game making tens of millions of dollars off of publishing. That's just off of royalties. And it's, you know, for that reason, it's something that every artist, every songwriter, producer needs to understand better.
I mean, you got to have a pretty stacked catalog to be making that kind of bread, right? Like,
Yeah, you do. But
you got to
but
have some hits in your catalog.
you have to have hits. But, you know, as, you know, if this might get a little nerdy, but like if we look at the last 20 years, you know, we had the music industry reach the height at like CDs,
Yeah.
right? Where it was just making so much money and then it kind of bottomed out. But as streaming grows, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, right? And even platforms like TikTok and the meta platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, all of these platforms pay publishing income, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as these platforms grow, as the industry grows, that pie is actually getting bigger and bigger and bigger for more and more artists. So it's easy to say, yeah, you need to be stacked. You need to have a stacked catalog to be pulling, you know, $1 million a year in publishing. But this pie is going to continue growing,
Right.
and that's why it's so important for the next generation of artists and producers to understand what publishing is and how do you unlock that money for yourself from the system, because it's rightfully yours,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Can you give me an idea of like if I produced a song and that song goes mega super viral and then ends up landing in the top 10 charts on Billboard for like consecutive weeks, right? Let's say I'm the only producer on that song. No other co-producers or anything like that. What kind of money would that generate?
Right. So
I know it's like broad. There's a lot of variables.
It always depends on the song. Number one could be really different from number 10, and
Yeah.
not all number ones are created equal. Some of them are smashes. Some of them are
Right.
just smashes. But what I would say, and we see this, you know, even on KOSIGN, you know, we have writers, we have some producers on KOSIGN who have parts of top 10, you know, songs that they have, you know, some significant parts of. And what I would say is that, let's say you're the only producer on that song. Maybe you have 30-40% of that song. If that's in the top 10, that could easily be pulling you 6 figures a year.
Woo.
Right? And even, you know,
20%?
20%, again, it depends on the song.
Okay.
But, you know, we see writers, and these are writers that we work with, and some of them have signed up to KOSIGN, who will have even smaller than that, maybe even a 10 or 5% of a really, really meaningful record that maybe wasn't a number one, but was up there in the Billboard Hot 100 chart. And that could still be between, you know, low 6 figures over the next 2 or 3 years. And, you know, I think it's important to zoom out and understand, and that's just one song, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to zoom out and understand that this is the difference for a lot of folks of being able to make music full time or have to hold down multiple jobs in order to keep grinding it out in the studio.
Mm.
And that's why collecting your publishing money is personal for people, right? And it's also about understanding that, you know, let me put it this way, if we can, through the tools that we're building, let's say at KOSIGN, help in the next year, 100 young artists fully collect on that type of money to the point where even if you're pulling 40, 50K a year, which, by the way, that doesn't have to be that you have a number one song. That could just
Yeah.
mean that you're really building a meaningful audience, that you're doing pretty well on the master side, but you never touch your publishing royalties. Well, now let's say you're going to get 20, 30, 40K a year. That can get you to the point where now you're making music full time.
Yep.
Now you're investing your time fully into your craft. And the question is, how is that going to change culture? How's that going to, not only your life, how's that going to change the life of your fans?
Yeah.
How's that going to change the life of your collaborators? If we can, I zoom out and I think that we have almost like a trope in our culture of like the broke musician, the broke producer, the broke songwriter.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's like, we can laugh and it's kind of funny, but it's also, I take it seriously.
Yeah.
Because I think we almost assume that if you're making music, you should be broke.
Right.
But that's not actually true.
I
When we
hate
zoom
that.
out, we see a landscape today where more artists are reaching critical audiences than ever before. Through various platforms, streaming platforms, social platforms, it is more possible as an independent artist today to reach an audience that's meaningful than it ever has been in the history of making music. And that money is in the system. That publishing money is in the system. It's just locked up, and it's very difficult for most artists to understand that it exists and how to find it. And that's what I'm so passionate about. And it's not just me, but this is me coming from Kobalt and from KOSIGN, which is like, even if we can go to this generation of artists and producers and say, here's a tool to unlock your money, if that can help you make music full time, which it can, that will change the culture. So it's a good question about if you have a Billboard charting hit. And yeah, you'll pull in some serious money if you do, but it's also important to recognize you don't need a Billboard charting hit in order to make meaningful money from your publishing that could really change the trajectory of your life as an artist, as a producer, as a songwriter.
Interesting. How relevant is radio still when it comes to publishing? Like, I think the conversation's always around streaming now. I think that's still the predominant way that
Right.
people are consuming music, but we kind of forget that radio still exists. And I've always heard that if you have a song on the radio, it will generate significantly more money. Is that on the master side, the publishing side, or both?
Great question. Radio is incredibly relevant for publishing, and it's mainly for publishing. So in the United States, radio actually only pays out royalties really on the publishing side.
Wow.
The reason for that is that traditionally in the United States, the law was that, well, if we're playing it on the radio, if you're for the master side, it's promotion. So it's helping you sell records. Now, that is a little sus now because people don't buy as many records.
Yeah.
But putting that aside, radio is a huge part of the publishing income puzzle. And I recognize that for most songwriters, artists, producers coming up, it might not feel super accessible to them. And luckily, streaming also does pay on publishing. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you have a song that breaks into the radio, that is going to really accelerate your publishing income. And that's why it's so important to make sure you're set up to collect that income globally, not just in one country, but in every country around the world,
Yeah.
because radio is such an important part of the income puzzle. And obviously at KOSIGN, that's a huge part of what we're making sure we're collecting on is not just streaming royalties. We collect those as efficiently and directly as we can, and actually we collect them more directly than any of our competitors do. But on radio, yeah, it's incredibly important to collect that publishing money.